over?
Yeah, sure. We'll start over. I mean, we didn't get too far, so it's all good.
Yeah, so recording going now.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm here with Dominic and Brother K from the Bloodstained Men. They are a very popular anti-circumcision group, and we have a lot of amazing topics to discuss today. So to get started, Brother K, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the Bloodstained Men?
Yes. Hi. Thanks for having us on. I am Brother K. Of course, that was not my name at birth. I did change my name in 1986 because of circumcision. But I was born in 1947 in Miami, and I was circumcised with a device similar to this, which is the Gomco clamp. Circumcised on the day of my birth, which was normal in those days. And I refused to eat or drink for 3 days. My mother was very worried. She was in talks with the doctor. They finally had to feed me goat's milk. So I'm getting ahead of my story, but basically I was extremely traumatized as a newborn baby. Fast forward to 1980, I protested against circumcision in Northern California with a friend. We protested the California State Capitol, made the national news, Associated Press, Sacramento Bee, whole bunch of things. And then we raised our daughter, and in 2012, I came out of retirement to found the Bloodstained Men after the American Academy of Pediatrics released a statement, a pro-circumcision statement, trying to resurrect the dying institution of American circumcision. Founded the Bloodstained Men, and today we are a major nonprofit. We've just put up we've just signed a contract this afternoon. I announced it on Facebook. We signed a $6,100 contract with a billboard company to put up a billboard for 2 months on the interstate in a major American city. We're very happy about that. And our supporters have already funded most of that.
Amazing.
We protest in 60 cities a year. Obviously, during the Corona situation, we haven't protested, but we're now branching out, and this will be our first billboard. So we're working behind the scenes, and we're determined to educate parents and end circumcision in the United States.
Amazing. And Dominic, how about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. As you can see, I'm a little bit younger than the ever so youthful and energetic and vigorous Brother K, born in 1989, not 1947. But regardless, no, I came onto the scene after the 2012 AAP decision as well. There was never a point in time in which I, like so many of our colleagues, was a pro and then switched to anti. You could say I've always been somewhat of an intactivist, and I've got some stories up my sleeve about that. But there was, just through my own exploration and reading around and browsing and researching, I just found myself shifting from being just sort of a casual observer saying, hey, yeah, that's a terrible thing, I'm glad that didn't happen to me, to becoming more and more energetically, I've got to do something about this. I can't just sit idly by and just let this go unchecked. I have to do something to try and make my mark on the world and change what is an abhorrent practice. So just very informally kind of growing in that sense. And then in 2016, I met Brother K for the first time, and the rest is history.
Amazing.
And now Dominic is chairman of the board of directors of Bloodstained Men.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, great. So circumcision to me has always kind of struck me as something very bizarre, and I kind of have seen it as that the old practice of bloodletting, just kind of medical sort of ignorance. But obviously it's very widespread today. There's still a lot of people who are very much of the opinion that it's very important for a boy to get circumcised so that his health is in order, and so that, just sexual hygiene, etc. So perhaps we can get started with talking about the medical evidence and what's because I like to always be very fact-based, give people science and reason behind it. So maybe we can discuss the science and the hygiene behind, is it really necessary hygienically to circumcise boys?
Dominic, why don't you handle that? I'm going to find the link to the European statement while you talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the Western world, at the very least, especially in the English-speaking world, the Anglosphere, what we see around the topic of routine infant circumcision is it's a bizarre intersection of a number of different things: Victorian era sexual repression, pre-germ theory belief about contagion and disease and mental illness. There's all sorts of intersections of racism and cultural habits. So we see all these kind of things coming together in a bizarre, eclectic mishmash. But what always kind of underpins what is being done in the United States is this, as you mentioned, at the forefront of everybody's mind, a sort of medical rationale, which really, when you start to tease it apart bit by bit, is absolutely spurious and based on junk. So to be very blunt, it's a Bronze Age blood ritual, as you mentioned, that's dressed up with a lot of window dressings about health and hygiene and science, when the facts really don't support such a conclusion if you take an unbiased approach.
So it's not true that the foreskin easily holds dirt and STDs and all these things that people are saying.
Can you, I allowed enabled screen sharing. Can you share the screen that I'm looking at right now? This is the European condemnation of American circumcision.
Yeah, go for it, brother. Hit that share screen button.
I did. Can you see it?
No, you're not sharing the screen. You have to make sure you're not using more than one monitor, are you?
No. Oh, I see. Okay, hold on. All right, did that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're rolling. So when you see all of this prevalence of enthusiasm for routine infant circumcision and circumcision of young boys in the United States, we really stand alone in the world amongst industrialized first world nations who are claiming some kind of astounding medical silver bullet. It's been a disease in search of a cure, and what we're seeing here from the Pediatrics Journal is a bunch of the international medical leaders got together and pointed the finger at the American Academy of Pediatrics for promulgating a technical report in 2012, as brother mentioned, which is just riddled with cultural bias and bad science, methodological flaws. It's just it was a garbage paper, really.
In fact, let me read the final sentence of the abstract, and or of the first paragraph. The other claimed health benefits, including protection against HIV/AIDS, genital herpes, genital warts, and penile cancer, are questionable, weak, and likely to have little public health relevance in a Western context, and they do not represent compelling reasons for surgery before boys are old enough to decide for themselves. And that was signed by 38 leading European medical doctors from, I believe, 18 different nations. And that was published in the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics a little under a year after they issued their preposterous statement in favor of circumcision. The European medical community denounced them for it, and this is the evidence and the article that they wrote.
Interesting. So this is the major, the newest kind of major study debunking the old medical studies.
This is the newest unified opinion, world opinion against American circumcision.
As the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, stands in a seemingly rather authoritative place in Western medicine, American medicine, in that they're a trade organization really that's dealing with the health of babies and children. So they put out this 2012 technical paper, and the rest of the world comes around with their medical leaders and condemns this paper. And it's been curious that their papers normally have a 5-year term of validity. They've actually let that 5-year term run out without renewing the paper, without publishing a new one. So it tends to have the de facto weight of, if somebody writes a news article about circumcision, they tend to reference this 2012 paper. But really, I think it speaks volumes that the AAP has not chosen to come out and renew or reaffirm this stance. It almost seems like a rogue position that they took. But it is a little curious that they have not since then either reaffirmed it or walked it back by taking a different direction,
And
publishing
Scarlett,
a new paper that overrules it.
Yeah.
Scarlett, let me also point out, because I don't want to spend too long on the European denunciation. The fact is that the world is intact. The United States is the only secular nation in the world that circumcises its boys. All the rest of the circumcised men of the world are circumcised for religious and tribal reasons. Americans are the only people that have doctors circumcising baby boys. I mean, there's a few exceptions. Some doctors, a minority of doctors in Australia, for example, will do it. Or Canada has a little bit of a problem. But the United States is the only secular nation that routinely circumcises baby boys. Most of the 80 to 90% of the world's circumcised men are Muslims, Jewish, and African tribal men. And Americans and a few others make up the rest of it. But circumcision is not a practice around the world. Men are intact. South American men are intact. Asian men are intact. Chinese, Japanese, Indian.
Why America particularly? What's the motivation in America?
Oh, she's opened a can of worms there, Dominic.
Of course, we're going to open all of them today.
I think we have to.
Let me, and then you about 140 years ago, discovered the ancient reason for many circumcisions, which was to inhibit male sexuality. It was to make.
Oh, that's right. I remember reading that. It's the original purpose was because they did not want boys to masturbate. Is that correct?
It inhibits masturbation. The foreskin is essentially a masturbation sleeve on the end of the penis.
Right.
And it inhibits masturbation. Of course, American men have adapted. There's all number of jokes about how it didn't work. Well, it didn't work, but it did change the way that men have to masturbate. And the way American men masturbate is called the death grip. American men have to take a death grip to masturbate. Whereas when you have a foreskin, just very, very subtle movement of the foreskin is sufficient. But so that's how circumcision came to the United States. These puritanical anti-sex doctors of the Victorian era in the late 1800s, they introduced it. And when that became an embarrassing reason in the 20th century, they invented medical justifications afterwards. The medical came later.
After.
That was just putting lipstick on a pig. That's all it was. So Dominic, you can pick it up there.
Yeah, and there's very much a sense in which, even though there's been all of these after the fact justifications, as I like to say, a disease in search of a cure, these quack Victorians pre-germ theory coming up with all these crazy ideas about how overstimulation of the sexual behavior was going to cause somebody to go mentally insane or develop all.
Right. They said masturbation might make people crazy, right?
Yeah. So there was a sense in which to them it was medical, but it's obviously a deeply flawed medical rationale.
And they wanted to circumcise girls.
Yeah. So
And they did. They did.
Thankfully, it never really caught on too much in the United States or any.
It did in the Midwest. It did in the Midwest a little bit. We have women.
A little bit, but not to the same extent. Yeah, you're right.
Women are shocked.
They're represented.
These American doctors wanted to pour carbolic acid on a woman's clitoris, on a girl's clitoris, and they cut it off. There is female.
And there is female genital mutilation in parts of the Middle East and Africa as well.
Let me clarify something on that. Many people say, "Oh, you can't compare male circumcision to female circumcision. Female circumcision is much worse." Well, the female circumcision that gets the headlines is gruesome. It's where they totally cut off the clitoris and sew the girl up. But that is the rare form of female circumcision. The most common form of female circumcision is absolutely criminal, but in terms of severity, much less severe than male circumcision. The most common form of female circumcision is practiced in the Muslim nations, chiefly Indonesia. Indonesia is a real culprit. And what they do is they cut a piece of the clitoral hood off of the girl, about the size of a grain of rice. They cut off a piece of the girl's clitoral hood, and that is the major female circumcision in the world. The media focuses on the dramatic one to promulgate this myth.
Why would they cut off just a piece?
That's been the tradition. That's female circumcision. That's been the. I mean, I assume probably in the past. Well, I mean, some of them do cut off the entire.
It's just general ignorance and different ideas floating.
Well, it's because superstition and sort of a religious delusion.
When you look at Detroit, this FGM case that was prominent in the last couple of years here, where we had a medical professional, a doctor, female doctor, who was with the Dawoodi Bohra sect of Islam. What they were doing to these young girls behind closed doors after hours in a clinic there could variously be described as either a nick or a scrape or tiny little abrasion on the clitoral area there. Clearly,
or breaking the hymen.
Yeah, that's another thing that's featured as well. But what we clearly see is something which runs a gamut of intensity from hardly anything to absolutely gruesome. Yet the West has chosen to stand in condemnation of any sort of interference on the genitals of a female child, while blatantly ignoring the culturally acceptable mutilation of boy children.
And I do definitely want to keep the highlight on male circumcision, because as awful as the female circumcision is, at least there's that acknowledgement. What's so baffling to me is that male circumcision, which is to me quite similar, considering you're mutilating the most sensitive region of a male's genitalia, but it's so accepted. So I want to kind of wrap our heads around this, trying to understand why has this become so accepted, and how can people become informed about it and realize that it's pretty much a silent.
There are two main obstacles that I see. One is that many Christians believe that because it's in the Bible, it must be okay. But it's in the Old Testament. Christians in our movement know that Jesus was the last blood sacrifice. The New Testament says there is no circumcision is done with. That's what the sacrifice of Jesus was about, doing away with the old covenants. And the second is that doctors have they've done it for so long that they don't want to admit that they've done something terrible to the American people.
Do you think
you've got the force of tradition and religion.
Do you think it's a bit like Stockholm syndrome, a bit like where
absolutely
all these parents, I don't think any parent wants to acknowledge that they have mutilated their children. So maybe
every man who comes to the realization that he has been injured in his genitals, which it's a lifelong injury. It doesn't repair. When you cut off part of a man's penis, it doesn't repair. It's not self-repairing. Like when you cut yourself, that repairs itself. But every man has gone through a period of depression, disbelief, doubt, negativity, loathing. And you get through that and you realize that you have an obligation to use that rage, that emotion, to use those feelings, that passion, to stop it for the next generation. That's what that's what our job is. Our job is to protect the community, and that's what Bloodstained Men are doing. We are doing our best to protect the community of children. That's what men have historically done in human cultures, protect the community. And Bloodstained Men and the women who are with us, so many moms are with us, and women who even aren't moms. But people say, so the doctors in the Bible are the big obstacles, and people say, well, doctors wouldn't be doing it if it was so terrible. That's not the case. There are many terrible things that have been done in human history that you could.
Right, we just have
And
there's been so many crazy things in the past, for sure. And so it's interesting you bring up this point about the trauma, and a lot of men kind of have a realization at some point in their life, and they feel this resentment. And since I'm very interested in gender and sexuality, and I feel that currently there's a lot of anger in general amongst men, and a lot of men, there's certain men's groups that are forming now, like the Men Going Their Own Way. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And there's a lot of this just hostility and resentment against the feminine. And the way I see it is like, if it's not, just kind of finding women to use sexually and discard, or just kind of, debasing women verbally or whatever, then it's just a general, like a dislike towards the feminine. And I think that a lot of that probably subconsciously could stem from realizing that, a lot of men were basically betrayed at birth by their mothers,
a Jewish scholar,
about
a Jewish scholar, Miriam Pollack, in Boulder, Colorado, wrote an influential article. I can find it and send it to you. That was published. I can't remember the title of it, but she theorized that in a male-dominated culture, circumcision is used to break the maternal bond. And she was speaking as a Jewish mother who had circumcised two children, and she came to her realizations late in life. But she's outspoken against it. But that it absolutely does break.
But that's actually like a magic ritual that's done.
And it's true. Well, it actually, I mean, it's magic in a way, but yes, it's got all kinds of supernatural and But it does break the maternal bond and replaces it with a bond to the male community, to the It's like a fraternity of circumcised men.
Right, and I've seen that there's certain religious rites where the priest or the rabbi sucks the blood from the infant and strange things like that, right?
And the women are generally not in the room. The women are put in another room while that's happening. But so you've got all these men,
the patriarchal sort of religious.
You've got all these men growing up without that maternal. I mean, I know it's horrible, terrible for regret moms. We call moms who circumcise their sons and learned the truth too late. They're called regret moms. They regret what they did. It's terrible. It's a terrible burden for them. Many of them are extremely depressed, and that no matter what they do, there was some rupture of the maternal bond, which is, according to Miriam Pollack, the point of circumcision to replace the maternal bond with the bond to the community, to the patriarchal community. And so men, it's the easiest thing for a man who just really wants to relax, smoke a joint, drink a beer when he gets home from work. He doesn't want to think about, man, they really screwed me over. And so we have a tough row to hoe to get through to men on this issue, because you have to be willing to look at the injury, and it's going to depress you or enrage you. Everyone will deal with it in their own way. But so the path of least resistance is, like you say, the Stockholm syndrome. I'm fine. My son's going to be fine. If it was anything really bad about it, doctors wouldn't do it. But we know throughout human history, people have done terrible things on a mass scale that everyone thought was okay at the time, and we condemn them in retrospect.
So can you talk a little bit about the contraption that you had and basically exactly what happens? And this happens right after the child exits the womb, correct? It's shortly after?
Well,
Or how long?
the lucky babies, I think, get to live a few days before they do it. Jewish babies actually have it better. They get to go, I think, 7 full days, and they're circumcised on the 8th day.
Yeah, the 8th day.
But I mean, there are a number of these contraptions out there. This is the Gomco clamp. It's most circumcisions in the United States are performed with the Gomco clamp. There's also a Mogan clamp and the Plastibell, but they all essentially do the same thing. Let me disassemble this and I'll show you.
And the baby is strapped down, right?
Baby is strapped down to a board. But
so that nut that brother is unscrewing right now, the function of that is to act with a lever-like effect on the bell, which is on the other side.
If you've ever seen one of the old-fashioned tire irons, do you see the resemblance of this to a tire iron? This shape?
Yeah.
So
it's like a little torture device.
Yeah. So what happens is, and this is an actual this is the 1.1 centimeter. This is used on a newborn baby. You can see how small the because if you compare the size of my finger, you can see how small the head of the baby's penis is, 1.1 centimeters, and there's also a 1.5. Oh, and this is really sick. Doctors have learned how to flatter parents. So doctors will tell parents, "Oh, we had to use the big clamp on your son. He's hung." So doctors actually flatter, and then parents brag about it on Facebook. My son is so well endowed, they had to use the big clamp on him. But so what happens is they cut open the foreskin, and they pull it back from the head of the penis, which is excruciatingly painful, and then they insert the head of the foreskin in this bell, and then the foreskin is pulled up over the arm of the bell. Think of this bell as protecting.
Oh, so it's already painful, like.
Some of the babies are passed out
before
at this
the mutilation.
Well, the first step of the actual procedure itself is to stick a probe or some other tool, forceps, what have you, into that very tiny, almost pinhole-sized opening at the most distal end of the penis, because what they've got to do is get under there in much the same way as a kitten is born with its eyes fused shut. It is the same with
so they gotta like
young baby boy. They're actually almost like tearing your fingernail off of your finger is what they're doing as the very first step of each and every infant.
Okay, so one thing that when I try and understand how is this a thing is what I feel is because of our memory, because when we're babies, we don't really retain information, but a baby has just as much, if not more, physical sensitivity, right?
Absolutely.
But it seems that there's this weird cognitive dissonance because we think, well, I don't remember what happened when I was a baby. So they don't think that's extremely painful, but we remember everything. I think we remember, isn't there, stories of, people who have dreams and remember being in the womb, and people who remember, it's not as developed of a memory as later in childhood and stuff, but that information, that trauma is still stored.
I'll give you the best example.
You're still feeling that pain,
The best example for memory that everyone can understand. You don't remember learning to speak, but you speak. And
right.
if you hadn't learned to speak early in when you don't remember learning to speak, you wouldn't be as articulate as you are now. So there are many things we learn when we start learning when we're born. From the time
so one of the first things that infant boys are learning is that the world is an unsafe place, and that people are
cruel, a cruel unsafe place.
sexual region. So I'm sure you can see all the sexual dysfunction if you look at the news, things in Hollywood, things in government, and there's
The way
just
Marilyn Milos, what I like to call the grandmother of the intactivist movement, she says this is really where sex and violence meet for the first time. So
right.
if I would have a hard time thinking of any more of a grim pronouncement to make about what we are doing to a nation of our sons, and fooling ourselves as a culture into thinking that, oh, well, it's just a little snip, or they won't remember it, or they hardly ever feel it, or they'll use anesthetic.
But they don't use anesthetic
with that.
typically, do they?
It's hit or miss.
And even if they do, that's
damning. A really damning thing about what we're doing is that it's so capricious. It's at the discretion of providers at the time in a medical setting who are performing this wound, this terrible surgery that's not medical at all. Some of them use an EMLA cream, EMLA, topical anesthetic. Some of them are using an injectable form of lidocaine, and in some ways that initial stick of the needle just starts the whole stage. It's inherently painful itself. So
painful itself, yeah.
Yeah. So it's all over the map. The experience varies wildly in that sense. But what is unequivocal and what is clear is that you have a newborn child whose developmental, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual task, having just exited a protective environment of his mother's womb, is trying to enter the world, feel safe, nourished, connected to his parents, especially the mother, establish a breastfeeding bond. And if he has any luck at all, as brother mentioned, he'll be able to persist in that for a little while before this terrible event happens. But quite often it's within a matter of hours that he's snatched away from hopefully the skin to skin contact that he's got with his mother, just snatched away and then submitted to an absolutely gruesome and unnecessary medical intervention, which is not at all, as I say, medical. So you have.
I should mention, Dominic, that you say it's capricious. It's up to the doctor or nurse how much of the penis to cut off, and they're all over the map there.
Yeah, there's no dotted line on the human penis that says cut here.
Isn't there all sorts of bizarre mishaps where they suffer lesions and things like where they do it wrong and then they're scarred for life.
They cut off one boy's penis. There were a pair of twins. They cut off his entire penis. I mean, it was not deliberately, but his penis, they burned it off. And a
lot more than one of them at that, but there's some very notable examples.
Doctors told the parents to raise him as a girl, and he committed suicide around the age of 39.
David Reimer, for those who want to plug it into the vision.
So let's kind of move ahead into, we obviously know how atrocious it is as an infant, so you explain the traumatic procedure. What happens now later in life when, as a man, he's sexually active, whatever, what is he missing out on now? Or like, how is the sexual experience different? Because I do want to say that, being a female in the Western world, I think most of us women are, socialized to accept that a circumcised penis is more attractive, and we've been conditioned to that. So I think I've met a couple of men who were ashamed of not being circumcised because it's they think it looks eccentric, there's like funny names about it, etc. So maybe you can touch a bit on the difference in the sexual and intimate experience and a man's relationship to his own body when he's intact versus not.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the case that nature's design for male genitals, it's quite elegant, actually. What you have is a complex structure that provides, at a very high level, mechanical, protective, and sensory functions. And when I say mechanical, during the act of intercourse, you've got a structure which provides a gliding or almost bearing-like lubricative motion as you have it back and forth. And with the circumcised penis, that, of course, depending on how tightly the man has been circumcised, that mechanism has been diminished, if not destroyed.
The circumcised penis has been described as a pole with a hole.
Laughing, but you know, it's inherently not funny. I think we
I'm sorry. No, the way he said it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's gallows humor.
No, but it makes sense what you're saying. It makes sense what you're saying, because why I
It's
believe
gallows humor, but
it's so bizarre. There's almost nothing you can do. But
right, no, nature has perfect design. Like, why I feel like maybe if we didn't have this, people wouldn't have to buy like lube, or
oh, absolutely.
women wouldn't complain.
Let me stop you right there. Europeans don't use lube. And when they see the lube jokes on American TV, none of them know what it means until they become intactivists, and then they figure it out.
oh, so that's why there's a bottle of lotion on the nightstand.
And
etc.
and a prevalent theme for intactivists is that in general, circumcised sex is dry and painful for women, because the man does not have any lubrication, and he does not have, as Dominic said, the lubrication that the foreskin provides. So
but how are we gonna, like, how are you going to convince? You see how religious people are, and granted, this is I actually knew an activist who was lobbying against female genital mutilation, and what she did is she basically said, well, there's nowhere in the Quran that says that actually this is okay. So it's more of the religious clerics in Islam that were saying it's okay. And it's recently in Egypt sort of been outlawed. They're just trying to like weed it out of the small, farming villages. But how are you going to tell these age-old, Christian or Judaic religions, like, how are you going to tell them basically that how are you going to tell these old world religions
they're wrong
for thousands of years? You know how people cling to their religion.
They're dinosaurs.
They're wrong.
It's
Yeah.
profoundly difficult thing to do. And
that's what we're doing.
It's
that's
hard enough.
On social media.
Yeah, we are, but it's hard enough in a Western industrialized American context. It's hard enough to convince people, hey, look at the evidence in a medical context, and get them to change their mind because of all the cognitive dissonance and cultural bias that has led us to accept this. It's even harder when you take that out of a Western context and look at it from the lens of Judaism and Islam. Now, that's not to say that within those contexts that you don't have people who object, because as a matter of fact, you do. First of all, in Islam, even though we tend to think of Islam as monolithic, as you mentioned, neither male nor female circumcision is a feature of the Quran, but it tends to show up in more of the kind of ancillary writings and cultural practices. I believe it's the Hadith. And in Judaism, neither is it unanimous there. You've got a growing minority but vocal movement of Jews who are now instead practicing Brit Shalom instead of Brit Milah. In
Israel too.
In Israel, yes, not just in America, but in Israel too. And the Brit Shalom ceremony is one in which you welcome this new life into your community and initiate them without harming the guest of honor. So there's no physical cutting of the baby.
Great. So you're saying maybe the solution is reform of the religions rather than completely toss.
Yeah, it's possible. You can even look at this for example, from a Jewish ethics perspective. In Jewish ethics, not only is it acceptable to change and adapt with time when one begins to see that, hey, there's a better way forward. Some would even argue from a Jewish ethical perspective that you're obligated to adapt and change and get better. And there's all sorts of interesting aspects in Judaism that you could look at. For example, the mitzvah of protecting the vulnerable, the innocent. So there's room for change there, but it's an uphill battle because of everything that we've discussed, the cognitive dissonance, the difficulty for people and cultures and institutions to stop and, first of all, talk about sex. And
That's the problem.
who wants to talk about your penis in a room full of
Right, and it's actually it's probably considered a bit inappropriate, right? Oh,
absolutely,
about children, but then, I mean, if you look at all these scandals, and these claims of people practicing pedophilia and things like that, I believe that there's a weird balance to nature, and when something's done, it kind of comes out, when it's repressed, it kind of comes out in the other end in strange ways. So a lot of what I'm passionate about is de-perverting sexuality and turning it, into an open discussion so that we can address these issues, and it's not so stigmatized, it's not so a dirty thing, but in its pure form, it's just a pure, just like bees and flowers, it just removed from that dirty cultural stigma that started all this animosity and atrocious practices in the
and in fact, that word dirty, it's interesting you would say it, because that is on social media, you can see all the time that people that are defending circumcision just keep referring to the filth and the dirt, the dirty aspect of what they call the male genitals. But I do want to emphasize, though, that we talked about the religious component, but in the United States, our main struggle is reaching parents who circumcise their babies in hospitals. The doctors and the nurses very often are quite aggressive in promoting it, and parents.
Well, they use the stem cells, don't they? Don't they sell? I've heard they sell the.
There is an entire market.
Cosmetic industry.
Yes, there's a market.
Lab research.
There is a market for baby foreskins. And in fact, when the hospitals that do sell the foreskins to the biotech market deliberately cannot use anesthetic on the baby because they don't want that anesthetic to get into the foreskin tissue to degrade it for purposes of the biotech industry.
And how would a parent know whether their child is receiving anesthetic, or
you generally won't?
A lot of parents kind of let it go and they kind of just trust, like, I trust you, doctor, I trust you. Like,
on the consent form, I've seen one of the consent forms where they're going to recycle, they're going to take the baby's foreskin, and they don't say, all they do is on the consent form, there's a little box that says, I authorize the hospital to dispose of this as they see fit, or in other words, the hospital is basically given ownership of the. They don't tell the parents, oh, we're going to turn around and sell this to the biotech industry.
Yeah, of course they don't tell that. They just kind of do it.
But there is a checkbox on the consent form where the parent does relinquish all rights to the foreskin. I mean, it's ghoulish.
And again, in this whole theme of. In this whole theme of secrecy and taboo and hiding everything below the surface, one of the motifs we run into time and time again is the lies that people are telling parents of new baby boys. He won't feel it. He didn't feel it. He slept right through it. He didn't feel a thing. He took it like a champ. All of these toxic ideas, which are just.
But there's so many videos of the baby like screaming, and it sounds like the scream of death, like the worst torture. I'm pretty sure in 200 years, you know how we have those like torture museums in Europe? I'm pretty sure in about 200-300 years, hopefully less with the work you're doing, they're going to feature that little contraption that Brother K was holding and the strapping device, and they're. You can look back and be like, wow, look at these barbarians.
I like how you call it the scream of death.
They don't see it in the moment. They don't see it until they look back. I'm like, whoa, bloodletting was barbaric. Whoa, they used to give, they used to put lead, they used to give babies, all this crazy medicine, and like people don't see it in the moment. They don't see all these things until like 700 years later, and they're like, wow, they were barbarians.
The
So
scream of death. You said it, the scream of death. It is. It's a scream unlike any other scream you ever hear a baby utter. And I raised a daughter, so I know there's nothing like it.
That's not a normal scream of a baby.
no.
So
What do we
Go
do
ahead.
now? I mean, I feel for all these men that you know have already had this, and it's not really reversible. I know that there's some surgeries where they attempt to reconstruct the foreskin and stuff like
Well,
that.
there is a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel for a man that is motivated. He can restore his foreskin. It doesn't. You know, it doesn't. It'll never be the same thing. But the skin of the penis is unique in that you can stretch it mechanically, and it will grow new cells. It's not just stretching it, but it actually grows new cells. And men are successfully restoring that and covering their glands. It's called growing. They
in
grow
much the same way as people use jewelry to expand the tissue of their ears, the same exact principle applies
Okay.
to the shaft skin and inner mucosa, which are left behind on a circumcised man. By applying tension to that tissue, the cells begin to expand and divide and grow, and then you create something which is a remarkably good approximation in restoring the mechanical and protective properties of that penile prepuce. But as brother mentions, not quite the same thing, because you can never put back the unique anatomical features like the muscle, the nerve endings,
Right.
vessels, and such.
And just the trauma, the cellular trauma. So
Let me say this, Vic, we may not come back to it. Let me just say this for men who are interested in restoring. You can Google foreskin restoration manual tugging, and it's a very simple technique. You can do it when you take a leak, and once you grow enough skin, you can use a device, and you can find out more about the devices by Googling NORM, National Organization of Men Restoring, or of Restoring Men, NORM. You can, and there's a whole community of restoring men, and it's at least 250,000, and I suspect it's probably more like 500,000 and more.
So really a remarkable grassroots do-it-yourself solution to what has become almost an institutional problem. A lot of people cringe. A lot of people say, well, wait, my doctor doesn't tell me anything about this, but it's painless if you're doing it right anyway, safe and effective. So as brother mentioned, really a light at the end of the tunnel for men who feeling this wound, both physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, to take some form of action to reclaim agency over their own body.
Exactly, to feel
disavow that wound.
Well, and you get coverage of your glands. You no longer have your naked glands out there in the open. You actually get coverage as nature intended. You get coverage of your glands.
And sensitivity back.
Do you think that there's some sort of like psychosomatic, psychological effects from not having that coverage? Like maybe does it make men feel more vulnerable? Like maybe it could be why modern men are not so in tune with their emotions. I'm sure there might, if you did an observation, you'd probably notice that the men who were intact probably are more in touch with their sentiments and their emotions. The body is the subconscious mind, and it's all connected. So
I think it definitely, I know from me personally, it leaves you uncomfortable in your own body. And women get it. When I say to women, can you imagine how it would feel to live without your clitoral hood? And women like cringe. You just cringe.
Right, it's like being exposed 24/7. You're not
right. It's so you are no longer at home. You are no longer at peace in your body, and that's just a fact.
As an intact man, I found the prospect of potentially, having to live a lifetime with my glands exposed is one of the most petrifying things I can think of. And there's a physical and a emotional, energetic, psychological sense to this. Physically, we know that adverse childhood experiences, there's absolutely unequivocally medical literature which tells people that the best practice with newborn children, neonates, is to avoid pain. So we know that pain in the young child is terrible. It has lasting consequences. This is evidence-based. But we can also look at this from a more of a spiritual side, as I know you like to tend to do, and thinking about this just first thing that happens in your life, being such a violent betrayal of your autonomy, your physical being, the destruction of the bond that you're supposed to be developing with your mother. So, whether we're looking at this in terms of the chemicals, stress hormones, impact on the nervous system, or from that more metaphysical standpoint, it's a huge deal, and
Absolutely.
trying to wake people up to.
Right. And I do think, tantric yoga and all these new emerging energetic healing practices could be very good for men to just regressively kind of address that trauma, because when you go into, those theta states and going into the body and reprocessing what happened, it helps kind of remove the somatic trauma from the body. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important as well.
Actually, the Hindus believe circumcision is a desecration of the human body.
Right. I always did like Eastern religions better. And look at your son, his body, his choice. Why don't they just give men that option? If they grow up older and they decide it's sturdy, they can always go and choose, but an infant.
Right, but men aren't crazy. Men aren't crazy.
Intact men generally are not lining up to go get circumcised.
Right, I'm saying.
Unless they've been fed a line of BS. But no, you're absolutely right. There's an aspect of autonomy here, which we are violating the autonomy of a human being in a profound way, not just the human being's body, but in a deeply personal way.
Scarlett, full screen me for a second, Scarlett. I want to show you something.
Okay, full screen. I think
I don't think we have the ability to do that.
I mean.
Oh yeah, it's on the upper right-hand corner. Enter full screen.
Well, no, I just want to see what I'm wearing.
Oh, I see the boy. Oh, go back more. Yeah, no. I think hold on. Enter full screen. Oh no, you can't.
Yeah, your camera angle is just barely picking it up.
Can you put
let me change my camera angle.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the bloodstained suit.
In case you guys are wondering, I'm only wearing blue denim.
It's perfect. It's as traumatizing as it should look. I honestly think it's genius marketing. It's brilliant, and that's what people need to see. And if it makes them uncomfortable, then they need to ask why.
That's what we're doing. It's intended to be a brick in the face, metaphorically speaking, an arresting visual symbol. When somebody steps into this bloodstained protest costume to do what we do with bloodstained men, we are really trying to, in a as direct as possible way, show people the wounding that we're continuing to inflict on boys and the men they will become. And by wearing the stain on the outside of the clothes, it's almost a direct representation of the wound which exists underneath the clothes. So we like to say that babies who bleed become men who have bled, and that's what you see with this bloodstained protest costume or outfit.
And one interesting thing is that it is so shocking. We've had several TV stations that will refuse. They come out and do a report on us, and they refuse to show the bloodstain on their.
It's too graphic, right? But you were on Tosh.0, right?
Right, and in fact, do you want me to play a little bit of that for you?
I can. I could try to clip it in.
I can do a screen. Let me see if I can do that.
We should add that in post, brother, or give people the link to check that.
Okay. All right.
Right. I'll put the link in the description to your
Okay.
12.0 episode.
But we touch on an interesting and I think important point is that, you know, being out there in public doing what we're doing, people have a very visceral reaction to this. So, you know, even though there's all kinds of logical fallacies which might be going through their head, they are uncomfortable. And that discomfort that comes up when people see what we're doing, it's a primal thing. On some deep level, people know it registers and it
Maybe it's that subconscious guilt and shame.
Yeah, there's a, you know, the blood taboo, the sexual taboo, all of these things come into play, and we have people, you know, they try and hide the bloodstained protesters from their children. They don't want their children to know what a penis is, what circumcision is, what sex is. It's as you're saying earlier, there's just such a taboo around any of this, and that difficulty to bring the truth into the light is what makes this issue such a difficult one, because we're fighting an upstream battle in this.
We have seen parents literally push their children onto the floor of the car not to see us. And you'll find this very interesting, Scarlett. I told you we just announced today that we've signed a $6,100 contract for a billboard.
Are they going to let you put that image?
I'm sorry?
Are they going to let you put your signature look?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
great.
But the interesting thing is, this was the third.
It's freedom of speech. You're not doing anything, you know.
But they don't have to. We did have 2 billboard companies turned us down. One billboard company turned us down flat. They said, we don't want your business at all. The second billboard company said we would have to take the bloodstain off of
That's some deep shame. That's generational shame, you know.
But our board of directors kept at it, and we did sign a contract today with another billboard company.
That's exciting. So, you'll have to send me some photo updates on that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So, and aside from these billboards, how do viewers, if someone is watching and you know they're motivated, like how can they participate? How can they advocate? You know, how can people join you? How can they spread? How can we all spread awareness about this?
Well, there's several things you can do. One thing, you can go to our website, which is bloodstainedmen.com, and we have a do-it-yourself. We have a store. You can buy a Bloodstained Men T-shirt, and all of our gear is almost at cost. Where it's basically we want to get the word out there. So like our T-shirts are $17.76, our Freedom T-shirts, and we sell stickers, information cards. You can message. We're on Facebook. Bloodstained Men and their friends. You can message us with questions. You can join our Facebook community, which is called Friends of Bloodstained Men. In normal times, we are protesting in 60 cities a year. So once things get back to normal, when they do, chances are we'll be protesting in someone's backyard sooner rather than later. So just follow the Bloodstained Men page, both on Facebook and on the internet, and we always list our upcoming events. We've had to cancel our last 3 tours of this year. We canceled our spring, summer, and now we're just not even organizing a fall tour because clearly we can't plan ahead like that. But Bloodstained Men, we will be back on the street protesting. If you Google Bloodstained Men circumcision protest, you'll see. I mean, we have had hundreds of media and social media posts over the last 8 years.
As well.
So we are, and we're known around the world. The UK newspaper, the Daily Mail, has carried a story on us. So it really is. Social media is remarkable. We're spreading the word on social media, and we're on the streets generating mainstream media, eyewitness, and social media posts. So it's like anything else in life. You know, the early people spread knowledge by word of mouth, and word of mouth is still a very, very effective if you're a propagandist, you want to control the media, and unfortunately, that leaves us, out because.
Yeah, the success of the intactivist movement is very much a grassroots story.
Right, because they're not going to show you on like
power.
PBS and NBC, right?
Not yet.
I mean, by all rights, the magnitude of what we're discussing is something which should be front page news in every newspaper in the world. But
It's a national emergency.
It's common sense for common.
And everyone agrees. Everyone agrees. I mean, female circumcision, they've rebranded as female genital mutilation because they knew the word circumcision.
Right. We should definitely acknowledge this is male genital mutilation.
Yes.
MGM.
But the mainstream media, they have no problem in denouncing female circumcision. And everyone pounds their chest, oh, what a horrible, horrible thing. And then they all turn away at the mention of male circumcision, male genital mutilation. So hypocrisy and corruption.
Well, thank God it's not both. Now we have to, we just gotta save our men now from this.
Absolutely. And women are a powerful force in our movement. Many of them.
You mentioned you have a lot of female members.
Yes, many of them are moms, and they don't want.
Can you tell a bit about some of the stories and how they come to you, and what sort of healing they do when they in the organization? What realizations?
I've met several regret moms. They came out and hugged me and thanked me for doing what I'm doing, and their tears were just pouring down from their eyes and down my cheek. I mean, they're distraught because they genuinely, parents love their children. American doctors are betraying parents. American doctors should not be doing what they're doing. Parents trust doctors, and doctors are taking advantage of that. It's criminal. It's criminal behavior. We have one sign that says circumcisers belong in prison. Everyone agrees that girl circumcisers belong in prison. What's wrong with American men? There's nothing wrong with us. What's wrong is our doctors are criminals. Criminal doctors are cutting babies.
So that's
and they can't escape the judgment of history.
I have no doubt that it's a matter of time. Intactivism will win, and we will win on the strength of the fact that American parents love their children. Parental love is one of the strongest forces in the world. So, if we can get past the influences which are turning us astray and come back to that essence, get the information into the hands of the people who need it. So many of these parents, and especially these mothers, are the ones to have this moment of, oh my God, what has happened? What have I done?
What have I done?
And it's a profound guilt and sadness, but
self-hatred too.
Yeah. Through activism is one of the ways men and women, they find that activism has a cathartic, healing effect towards a lot of this grief as a way to process and move through the release and let it go by, well, I can't go back and change what happened to myself or to my child, but at least I can try to leave the world a little bit better place.
And they do, and they are.
Absolutely.
Many of these regret moms have dozens of
even
friends.
if you save a handful of people, that's an entire lifetime that you're saving,
And that handful of people go on to save their friends. It snowballs, and it really is working.
Snowballs, yeah.
It really is working.
2 becomes 4, becomes 6, 8. Just,
Absolutely.
And I really hope
takes
that
off.
I really hope people watching this, it saves a few people and they tell people, and it just, it spreads. And so the more people watch and share, and more people, you get more attention, do more interviews, and more people just seeing you and understanding the cause.
And you asked a good question earlier, for which it will always be an incomplete answer. What can people do? Use your imagination. You don't have to clear what you do with anyone. You can protest. We've had people go out and they do their own protests in their own hometown, or go to a big city near you. When things are back to normal. Get a bumper. We sell bumper stickers at cost. We have decals on Bloodstained Men's store, bloodstainedmen.com. But we're called intactivists, and it's a combination of the word intact for not cut and activist. So it's called an intactivist.
Right.
And an intactivist is someone who sees what has to be done and does it. So don't come to me and tell me, that you should do this and you should do that. When you realize the horror and the scope of what we're up against, you can do it. You can figure out in your own life what you can do to have influence over this horrible thing.
Yeah, maybe if anyone knows, of pregnant women, if they have boys, let them know,
Intactivists get into all kinds of creative. I've seen some things I wouldn't have thought of myself, like leaving at a gas station pump. There's the credit card reader. People will just go up and stick an information card in the credit card reader of the gas pump, so the next customer has to go and find this, or leaving things in packages of diapers at the big box store, or inside of a car seat, in the car seat aisle for new parents. Somebody go find this information. Stickers, flyers, hiding things inside magazines. There's all kinds of, if you want to do this in a subtle way, all kinds of
I've got a funny story.
Creative things to do. Go ahead, BK.
Funny story. There was an intactivist a few years ago. She would go into her local library and put information cards in different library books. Well, apparently word started getting around, so the librarians started spying, trying to figure out who had finally. The librarian busted her. But the thought about librarian, just snooping around trying to figure out who was doing it.
And do you guys think, like, socially, because I just feel pretty much, just kind of as a final point, I do really feel that men get a bit of an unfair judgment or stigma, in the sense that we think, or we say that men are just these overly, sex obsessed, and they're just physical and all these things. But I do think that this is a symptom of, this type of trauma. Do you guys feel that with this type of healing, that the masculine, gender and the masculine energy will embrace more and be more comfortable with that intimacy, and that, collectively, maybe we can move more towards having more love in our sexuality, more connection, and just in general, more connectedness by healing this?
I think whether directly or indirectly, directly simply by not inflicting all of this harm and grief and wounding into people, or indirectly, by virtue of casting off some of these taboos and sexual shame, what have you, whatever process, the winding road that it's going to take us to get past this issue is going to create dividends, borrowed benefits for society as a whole. A society as a whole that has been suffering from the genital mutilation of its children, and that somehow manages to find the awareness and the compassion to cast this off, will be better for it. I guarantee you. There's no doubt in my mind. No matter what angle you're looking at.
But it's not going to be a dramatic change. It could be a dramatic change in the life of any one man or woman, but it's going to be a slow social change. It's not going to be dramatic. It took them 100 years, over 100 years, to implant circumcision as a cultural practice in the United States. So it's going to take some hard work by dedicated people like Bloodstained Men. And yourself, Scarlett, I can see you're listening and learning, and you can be very, very influential in this, as can all your viewers. And that's what this is about. It is about influencing the people around you.
Taking responsibility.
Yeah, having an awareness of these different dynamics allows us to be intentional in our lives and really show up in a different way that in our own small corner of the world, many hands make light work. So by each of us stepping into a new way of doing things, a new mindset, we can collectively really make a great change. And at the end of the day, just I think it comes down to so much of just compassion towards ourselves and towards these precious children. It sounds really cliche to say, but the children are the future. But children get it, and if you can get to people before people become parents and become either regret parents or do circumcision with their children and become so frozen in their cognitive dissonance that they can't change their mind. It really is the case that children and the next generation, we're already seeing lower prevalence of circumcision. So I think we're starting to get into the kind of the intact generation as the rates fall, the mindset shifts, and we're not there yet, but we're getting closer day by day and year over year. Just since I've started doing this over the past 5 years or so, I've seen the culture has shifted. First they how does it go? First they laugh at you.
They laugh, then
they ignore, then they laugh, and then they fight you, and then you win. So we're moving through that. It's, as brother said, it's not an overnight thing, but we're raising that consciousness.
Well,
Change.
To follow through on what you said, Dominic, about parental love, we have two strong forces on our side in this movement: parental love and the fact that what we're saying is true. Circumcision is a lie. It's a big lie. We have the truth on our side. Men around the world, like women, are intact. We do not need to cut the genitals of children. All children have a fundamental human right to an intact body. Circumcision is a lie. Intactivism tells the truth. So we have the truth and parental love on our side. So yes, our victory is inevitable, but the time frame is the only question.
Right. Well, I guess if that's we have it. I think we've covered pretty much everything that we can say for now, and I appreciate you gentlemen very much. I appreciate your energy and the work that you do.
Thank you, Scarlett. It's a deep rabbit hole, but it's been a pleasure to come on and just kind of touch on some of these topics with you. And there's certainly plenty more for folks to explore if they want. So thank you for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Thanks, Brother K. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Okay, take care.